I stood before the mirror in the hotel dressing room, adjusting my clothes one last time. The deep violet silk dress was something I had saved for, a custom piece that had cost me an entire month's retirement check. Peonies were embroidered in a dark thread along the collar and cuffs, the fabric shimmering softly under the lights. I smoothed out a non-existent wrinkle, seeing the 60 years of my life etched into the face looking back at me. But today, I had to look my most dignified for my son's wedding. "Mom, are you ready?" Michael pushed the door open, his suit perfectly pressed, his hair combed without a single strand out of place. My son, the groom, looked more handsome than I had ever seen him. "Ready, ready," I said, turning with a smile. I couldn't help but reach out and straighten his bow tie. My son looked so handsome today. Michael dodged my hand with a hint of embarrassment. "Mom, don't. I'm 30 years old." I pulled my hand back gracefully, a pang of bitterness in my heart. Yes, my son was a grown man, and today he would become someone else's husband. From this day forward, I would no longer be the most important person in his life. "Helen, the ceremony is about to start," a crisp voice called from the doorway. Claire was standing there in a stunning white wedding gown, her makeup flawless. She looked as perfect and beautiful as a porcelain doll. She was my future daughter-in-law, 5 years younger than my son, from a wealthy family, a marketing director at a multinational corporation. "Claire, you look so beautiful," I praised her, and I meant it. Claire gave a small smile, but her eyes lingered on me for a moment, her brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. She turned to Michael. "Honey, they're really waiting for us." Michael nodded, took Claire's hand, and they quickly walked away. I took a deep breath and followed them out of the dressing room. The wedding hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant light, and every corner was adorned with fresh flowers and satin ribbons. The guests were impeccably dressed, chatting and laughing. I took my seat in the reserved family section, surrounded by Claire's relatives. They looked me over with scrutinizing eyes, making me feel as though I were sitting on pins and needles. "I heard the bride's family paid for most of the wedding," one woman in the front row whispered. "That's right. The groom's family is middle class, at best. His mother is just a retired factory worker." My fingers twisted together in my lap. Michael had grown up without a father. I had raised him all on my own. To send him to college, I worked 2 jobs at a garment factory during the day and taking in sewing projects at night. Now Michael was successful, a project manager at an IT company. I thought our hard days were finally over. The wedding march began, and everyone stood. I watched my son take Claire's hand and walk slowly toward the stage, my eyes welling up with tears. No matter what anyone said, today was the most important day of my son's life, and I was proud of him. The ceremony went smoothly until the officiant announced, "And now we invite the parents of the bride and groom to the stage to receive a toast from the happy couple." I stood up, my heart racing. This was the moment I had been waiting for, to stand before everyone, accept a toast from my son and his new wife, and officially become a mother-in-law. I straightened my dress, ready to walk up. Just then, Claire rushed over to me and said in a low, urgent voice, "Helen, that dress is just too tacky. Please don't embarrass us." I froze, feeling as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. The guests around us had already started whispering, some looking our way with curiosity. "Claire," I tried to explain, "I had this dress specially made. Please," she pleaded, but her eyes held a hard, non-negotiable edge. "Your dress completely clashes with the style of our wedding. It will look terrible in the photos." My vision blurred, and my throat felt tight. I looked at Michael on the stage, hoping he would say something, but he just stood there awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. The hall grew quiet, and all eyes were on me. I could feel my face burning, my fingers trembling uncontrollably. Then, I did something no one expected. With a small smile, I slowly took off the violet dress. Underneath, I was wearing a quilted vest, made from countless scraps of fabric. It was a kaleidoscope of colors, yet it was surprisingly beautiful and harmonious. On each patch of fabric, a tiny image was embroidered, a baby's footprint, the logo of an elementary school, a university crest, and the dates of all of Michael's important milestones. The room erupted in a flurry of whispers. "What is going on? That vest is so unique. It looks handmade." Claire's face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" My voice was soft, but in the suddenly silent hall, it was perfectly clear. "I made this from the clothes Michael wore growing up. Every piece of fabric came from something I sewed for him. From the very first onesie he wore as a baby to the new shirt I stayed up all night to make for him when he left for college." I turned to the guests and held up the lining of my dress, where I had sewn a small family photo, a younger me and a little Michael, standing in front of the tiny house we used to live in. "I'm a seamstress. I don't have a lot of money, but I raised my son with a needle and thread. Today, I wanted to wear something stitched with love to my son's wedding. If that's tacky, then I suppose I'll just have to be tacky." The entire hall was silent. I saw a few older women in the front row dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. Claire's expression shifted from shock to fury. "Are you doing this on purpose to embarrass me?" "Claire," Michael finally ran down from the stage and grabbed his new wife's arm. "Don't be like that. She didn't mean it." "I didn't mean it?" Claire scoffed. "Stealing the show in front of all these people? What else could it be? Michael, you have to make a choice, right here, right now. Is it going to be your mother, or is it going to be me?" Michael looked at me, then at Claire, his face a mask of agony and indecision. Finally, he whispered to me, "Mom, please, just go home for now. I'll call you when Claire calms down." In that moment, my heart shattered. I nodded silently, picked up my violet dress from the floor, and turned toward the exit. The sound of murmuring followed me, but I no longer cared. Outside the hotel, the early summer sun was so bright it made my eyes ache. I stood on the sidewalk with no idea where to go. Home? The empty house would only make me feel more alone. Visit an old friend? I didn't want anyone to see me like this. In the end, I boarded a city bus and let it carry me aimlessly through the streets. The scenery outside the window blurred into a smear of colors, just like my thoughts. I remembered when Michael was a little boy, always proudly telling his classmates, "My mom makes the best clothes in the world." Back then, no matter how busy I was, I would always find time to sew him new outfits, and he would always put them on immediately, twirling in front of the mirror. When did my son start to become ashamed of me? The bus reached the end of its line. I got off mechanically and found myself at the city park. It was a place I often came to, quiet and shaded by trees. I found a bench and finally let the tears I had been holding back stream down my face. "Ma'am, are you okay?" a gentle voice asked beside me. I looked up to see a young woman looking at me with concern. She was holding a book and looked like a student from the nearby university. "I'm fine, thank you." I managed a weak smile, wiping my tears. The girl hesitated for a moment, then sat down next to me. "If you need someone to talk to, I don't have anywhere to be today." Perhaps it was the kindness of a stranger, or perhaps it was the emotions I had bottled up for too long, but I found myself telling this girl I had never met everything that had just happened. "So, your daughter-in-law wouldn't let you on stage because she thought your clothes weren't fancy enough," the girl said indignantly after I finished. "That is just awful." And I shook my head with a bitter smile. Maybe I just don't understand fashion anymore. Young people have their own tastes. I shouldn't have been so stubborn. "No, ma'am, this isn't about fashion. It's about respect," the girl said earnestly. "You sacrificed so much for your son. They should be grateful, not ashamed." Her words warmed my heart. We talked for a long time, until the sun began to set. Before she left, she insisted on getting my phone number. "Ma'am, my name is Maya. If you ever need anything, please call me." By the time I got home, it was completely dark. I turned on the lights, and the empty house felt especially cold and desolate. There were a few messages on the answering machine, all from old friends congratulating me and asking how the wedding went. I didn't reply. I just sat on the sofa, staring at Michael's photos on the wall. The phone rang suddenly. I hesitated, then picked it up. "Mom, it's me." Michael's voice sounded weary and heavy. "Hello," I said, not knowing what else to say. "Claire is still really upset about today. She said you deliberately made a scene to humiliate her." My heart clenched again. "Michael, you know I would never do something like that." There was a long silence on the other end. "I know, Mom, but Claire's pregnant. Her emotions are all over the place. Can you just apologize? For me, and for the baby." My hand holding the phone trembled. Pregnant? They had kept such huge news from me. And now, my son was asking me to apologize to the person who had publicly humiliated me. "Michael, I was very hurt today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I will not apologize, because I did nothing wrong. If my presence is going to be an embarrassment to you, then I can stay out of your life." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Michael sounded agitated. "That's not what I mean." "I'm tired. I'm going to bed," I said softly and hung up the phone. Tears streamed down my face again. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I made a decision. I would move away, to a small town down south. The cost of living was lower there. I could open a small tailor shop and live out the rest of my days in peace. If my existence only made things difficult for my son, then it was better to leave. The next morning, I started packing. Just as I was putting a photo album into a box, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Michael standing outside alone. His eyes were red and swollen. He clearly hadn't slept. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. He was holding a plastic bag with a few takeout containers inside. "Mom, I brought you some breakfast." His voice was hoarse, and he couldn't meet my eyes. I stepped aside to let him in, saying nothing. In the kitchen, I took out plates and quietly set out the bagels and coffee he had brought. The son who once shared every detail of his life with me now sat across from me with his head bowed, like a child who had done something wrong. "Mom, about yesterday." Michael finally broke the silence. "How is your wife?" I interrupted him, deliberately using the formal term instead of her name, Claire. Michael's fingers drummed unconsciously on the table. "She went to stay with her family. Her father is furious." I picked up a piece of a bagel, the food tasteless in my mouth. "Then what are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Michael said, looking up. For a fleeting moment, I saw a familiar light in his eyes, the look of the little boy who had always depended on his mother. "And I wanted to talk to you about the baby." The baby. The word was like a dull knife, slowly twisting in my heart. My grandchild, a new life I should have been overjoyed to welcome, had now become a wall between my son and me. "How many months?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. 3 months, Michael said, looking down. "We were going to tell you yesterday, after the wedding. But my tacky clothes ruined your plan." I finished for him with a bitter smile. "Mom," Michael's voice rose. "Can you please not be like this? Claire is just a bit of a perfectionist. She planned every detail of that wedding for months. And that quilted vest, it really wasn't appropriate for such a formal event." I put down my fork and looked directly into my son's eyes. "Michael, do you remember your 6th grade parent-teacher conference?" It was the same day the factory had a mandatory overtime shift. Michael paused, clearly surprised by the sudden change of subject. "I took the day off," I continued, my voice trembling slightly. "And I stayed up all night to make you a little suit. I used leftover fabric scraps from the factory floor, a dark blue with tiny white pinstripes. You put it on and were so happy you spun around in front of the mirror for half an hour, saying you were going to be the most handsome boy in the whole class." A flicker of emotion crossed Michael's face, as if the memory had touched him. "At the conference, all the other mothers complimented your suit. They asked me which high-end children's store I'd bought it from." I smiled, but tears began to fall uncontrollably. "You proudly told them, 'My mom made it herself. It's the only one in the world.'" "Mom." Michael's voice was choked with emotion. "And now, a piece of that little suit is sewn into the vest you were so ashamed of yesterday," I said, wiping my tears with my sleeve. "I don't blame you for thinking it's tacky. Times have changed, styles have changed. But what I cannot accept is that you let your wife humiliate me in front of everyone, while you, my own son, just stood there and watched." Michael's face went pale. He buried his head in his hands. "I didn't know what to do. Claire's pregnant. Her hormones are all over the place. The doctor said not to upset her." "So you chose to upset me instead?" I asked softly. The phone rang, a jarring interruption. Michael glanced at the caller ID, and his expression immediately tensed. "It's Claire." He went out to the balcony to take the call, his voice low, but I could still catch snippets. "I'm at Mom's." "No, don't be angry. I'll be home soon." After he hung up, Michael hurried back to the table. "Mom, I have to go. Claire isn't feeling well." "Go." I nodded, my heart sinking. I already understood his choice. At the door, he turned back. "Mom, Claire, she wants you to apologize. For the sake of keeping the peace." I took a deep breath. "Michael, one thing I taught you in this life is to have some integrity. I did nothing wrong, and I will not apologize for a piece of clothing." "But—" "Go," I cut him off. "Take care of your wife and your child." After the door closed, I collapsed into my chair, all my strength gone. The breakfast on the table, barely touched, grew cold, just like the relationship between my son and me. For the next few days, Michael didn't contact me, and I didn't reach out to him. I moved through my days mechanically eating, sleeping, packing. I decided to move to a small town in Georgia. An old colleague of mine lived there and said she could help me find work as a seamstress. On the 5th morning, as I was sorting through years of fabric samples, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Claire and her aunt standing outside. Claire was wearing a loose-fitting dress, her makeup perfect. She didn't look unwell at all. Her aunt was dressed in designer clothes, a string of pearls, real or fake. I couldn't tell, around her neck, her eyes looking down on me with a condescending air. "Helen," Claire said with a smile so sweet it was sickening. "May we come in and talk?" I stepped aside and let them in. Claire's aunt, she later insisted I call her Mrs. Gable, immediately began surveying my small apartment, her disdain obvious. "Mrs. Miller." Mrs. Gable began without preamble. "My niece is pregnant now, and it's not good for her to be upset. We hope to put the unfortunate incident at the wedding behind us." I looked at Claire. "I just wanted to attend my son's wedding. End of calm. The way you did it was humiliating for me in front of all my friends and family." Claire pouted, an expression that reminded me of Michael as a child when he couldn't have a new toy. "Now everyone is talking, saying I'm awful to my mother-in-law." "Claire," I said, trying to keep my tone even, "if you hadn't publicly called me an embarrassment, none of this would have happened." Mrs. Gable let out a cold laugh. "Mrs. Miller, with all due respect, that patchwork garment of yours was truly inappropriate for such a high-class event. The Hayes family is well respected in the business community. Our guests were all people of stature." A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I had to grab the back of the sofa for support. It had been happening more frequently lately. I suspected my high blood pressure was acting up again. "Are you all right?" Claire frowned, but she took a step back, as if she thought I might suddenly fall and try to sue her. "I'm fine," I said, taking a few deep breaths. When the dizziness passed, I said, "Let's be direct. Why are you here today?" Mrs. Gable took a document out of her designer handbag. "This is an agreement. If you sign it, you promise to refrain from any future behavior that could negatively impact my niece and her husband, and you will ensure your attire is appropriate at all family gatherings. In exchange, we will give you a sum of money as compensation." I took the paper. It was filled with dense legal clauses, but the core message was clear. I had to become an invisible mother, someone who wouldn't disturb their high society life. The compensation amount was $10,000. My hands began to shake, not because of the insulting agreement, but because of a sudden realization. My son knew about this. He had allowed his wife and her aunt to treat his mother this way. "Does Michael know you're here?" I asked softly. Claire and her aunt exchanged a look. "Michael is in a difficult position," Claire said. "He loves you, but he also has to consider the harmony of our new family. Helen, just sign it. It will make things easier for everyone." I slowly tore the agreement in half. "Please leave, and tell Michael that his mother may be poor, but she hasn't lost her integrity." Mrs. Gable's face turned livid. "Helen Miller, don't be ungrateful. Do you really think your son will side with you? He's part of the Hayes family now, with a bright future ahead of him. If you truly cared for him, you'd know what to do." "Aunt, don't get worked up," Claire said, calming her aunt before turning back to me. "Helen, please reconsider. Michael and I have a doctor's appointment next week for the baby. We'd like to have your answer before then." After they left, I sat on the sofa, feeling a weariness I had never known before. It wasn't physical exhaustion, but a deep, bone-wearying disappointment and sorrow. I picked up the phone and dialed Michael's number. It rang for a long time before he answered. "Mom." His voice was cautious. "Your aunt and your wife were just here," I said flatly. "They offered me $10,000 in exchange for a promise not to embarrass you again." There was a long silence on the other end. "Mom, they were just trying to keep the peace," he finally said, his voice full of torment. "Michael," I cut him off, "I'm going to ask you one last question. If I signed that paper, would you be happy? Would you still be ashamed to have me as your mother?" "Mom, I've never—" "Answer me," I insisted. Another silence. Then I heard him say, so quietly I almost missed it, "Mom, sometimes people have to compromise." My heart turned to ice. "Fine, I understand. Michael, from this day on, you live your life, and I'll live mine. I won't bother you again." "Mom, what does that mean?" "It means," I said, fighting to control the tremble in my voice, "I'm moving away, down south. You won't have to worry about me embarrassing you in front of your friends and family anymore." "No," Michael's voice suddenly rose. "You can't just leave. We need to talk." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said softly. "Take care of yourself. And the baby." After hanging up, I broke down completely. But strangely, amidst the tears, I felt a sense of release. I finally understood. My son had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. Over the next few days, I packed with a new sense of urgency. This old apartment, my home for over 20 years, was filled with memories of Michael and me. Pictures of him from every age hung on the walls, his school awards sat on the bookshelf, and the suit he wore to his high school prom, one I had also made by hand, was still in the closet. Packing each item felt like reliving the sweet and bitter moments of the past. The hardest thing to part with was my sewing machine, my old, trusty Singer. It had been my companion through countless nights of work, all to provide for my son. Just as I was debating whether to take the heavy machine with me, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was Michael, alone. His eyes were red and swollen, and he was holding a package. The moment I opened the door, he fell to his knees. "Mom," he choked out. I was wrong. I was stunned. The dust cloth in my hand fell to the floor. Michael held the package out to me. "I searched the whole house. This is all I could find." With trembling hands, I opened the package. Inside were scraps of old fabric, remnants of the clothes I had made for Michael when he was a child. Some were faded and yellowed with age, but the stitches were still clear. "I remember you said the vest was made from my childhood clothes." Michael's voice was thick with tears. "I was hoping you could make another one. Not for me, for your grandchild." I stroked the fabric scraps, my heart aching. "Michael, Mom, I've been thinking a lot these past few days," he said, looking up, tears streaming down his face. "After you left, I went back to our old house. Standing in that little room, I suddenly remembered you, sitting under that dim desk lamp, sewing clothes for me, one stitch at a time." He wiped his eyes. "I remember your fingers were always pricked and bleeding from the needle, but you always just smiled and said it was nothing. I remember how every time I put on a new outfit, your eyes would shine with pride and satisfaction. How could I ever call those clothes tacky? They were stitched together with your love." I helped him to his feet, and we held each other, weeping. In that moment, I saw my little boy again, the boy who would proudly show off the clothes his mother made to the whole world. "What about Claire and her family?" I asked softly. Michael shook his head. "I had a huge fight with them. I told them if they couldn't respect you, then this marriage was over." He gave a bitter laugh. "Even though it's already happened, I told her I could get a divorce." I looked at him in shock. "Don't be ridiculous. Claire is pregnant." "Mom," Michael said, gripping my hands, "the baby needs a grandmother. And I need my mom. My real mom, not some silent, invisible person bound by an agreement." I sighed, a mix of emotions swirling within me. "Michael, it's not that simple. Claire is your wife. You're about to have a child. A peaceful home is important. Peace isn't built on one person's silent suffering, Michael said firmly, his expression reminding me so much of his father. Claire has agreed to apologize to you, but she couldn't bring herself to come in person. He pleaded, Mom, please give us a chance. Please don't move. Looking into my son's earnest eyes, my resolve softened. Maybe, just maybe, this family could still be saved. I can stay for now, I finally said. But on one condition. You and your wife will come here for dinner. We need to talk properly. Michael nodded eagerly. Absolutely. This weekend? After he left, I looked again at the old fabric scraps, my heart full. Perhaps making a little patchwork outfit for my future grandchild would be a new beginning. However, fate seemed to have other plans. That evening, as I was sorting through the fabrics, a violent wave of dizziness hit me. The world went black, and I fell heavily to the floor. In the last moment before losing consciousness, I desperately reached for the phone but couldn't grasp it. A terrible thought flashed through my mind. If I die like this, Michael will have been the last person to see me. And we just reconciled. Then, darkness consumed everything. A blinding white light, the smell of antiseptic, the muffled sound of voices in the distance. I slowly opened my eyes to find myself in a hospital bed, an IV line in my arm. Outside the window, the night sky was dark, occasionally split by a flash of lightning. Mom, you're awake! Michael's voice came from my side. He rushed to the bed, his eyes red and swollen from crying. What happened? My voice was hoarse and unfamiliar. You were unconscious for more than 10 hours, Michael said, holding my hand. I called and you didn't answer, so I rushed over and found you on the floor. The doctor said you had a minor stroke, brought on by severe high blood pressure and exhaustion. A stroke. The word sent a chill through me. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, had a stroke and was paralyzed on one side. Will I be paralyzed? I asked, my voice weak. Michael shook his head. The doctor said they caught it early, so there shouldn't be any lasting effects. He hesitated. But they want to do a full workup, including a brain CT scan. Have you been forgetting things lately? Or suddenly been unable to recall familiar names? My heart tightened. It was true. In recent months, I'd often forgotten to turn off the stove. Sometimes the name of a neighbor I'd known for years would completely escape me. I had chalked it up to old age. Michael, Mom's fine, I said, trying to sit up. I was probably just too tired. Mom, Michael said, gently pushing me back down. Don't be stubborn. Do you have any idea how scared I was when I saw you lying on the floor? I thought. His voice broke. It was only then that I noticed someone else standing in the corner of the room, Claire. She was wearing a loose-fitting maternity dress and looked pale, but at least she was here. Helen, she said, walking over, her voice softer than usual. You really scared us. I looked at her, then at Michael, surprised. He explained quietly. Claire was worried about you too. She feels terrible about what happened at the wedding. Claire managed an awkward smile. Helen, I was too obsessed with the wedding. I wasn't thinking straight. Please don't hold it against me. I knew the apology wasn't entirely sincere, but it was a start. Besides, at that moment, I had more important things to worry about. What else did the doctor say? I asked Michael. He hesitated. They'll schedule more tests tomorrow. Mom, don't worry. I'm here for you. End of. That night, Michael insisted on staying at the hospital with me. Claire, though reluctant, didn't object. In the middle of the night, I woke up to see Michael curled up asleep on the small sofa, looking like an insecure child. My eyes filled with tears again. No matter what happened, he was still my son. The next morning, a team of doctors came on their rounds. The head of neurology asked me a few questions, and then scheduled a series of tests. Michael was by my side the entire time, while Claire left, citing a prenatal checkup. During the MRI, the loud humming of the machine made my heart race. The feeling of being enclosed in that narrow space reminded me of my days at the garment factory, stuck in a stuffy workshop for 12 hours at a time, breathing in cotton dust and chemical fumes, all to earn a little extra money for Michael's education. After the tests, the attending physician called Michael and me into his office. He looked at the results with a grave expression, and my heart sank. "Mrs. Miller," the doctor said, pushing up his glasses, "the MRI shows signs of mild cerebral atrophy. Combined with the memory loss you've described, we suspect it may be early-onset Alzheimer's disease." The world seemed to stop. Alzheimer's, dementia. The image of the old woman in my neighborhood who wandered the streets, unable to recognize her own children, flashed in my mind. "We'll need to do more tests to confirm," the doctor continued. "For now, it's just a suspicion. We will arrange for more detailed cognitive function tests." Michael's face was ashen. "Doctor, if it is, can it be cured?" "There is currently no cure, but early intervention can slow the progression of the disease," the doctor said, turning to me. "Mrs. Miller, do you have someone to look after you at home?" I shook my head. "I live alone." "That's not an option," the doctor said firmly. "In your current condition, living alone is very dangerous." This stroke was a warning sign. After leaving the doctor's office, Michael held my hand tightly. "Mom, move in with us. Claire's pregnant. You can help take care of things." I gave a bitter smile. "Do you really think Claire would agree to that?" Michael bit his lip. "I'll convince her. Mom, you can't be alone anymore. What if something happens again?" Seeing his anxious face, I couldn't bear to refuse completely. "Let's wait for the final diagnosis. Maybe it's just a false alarm." But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The increasingly frequent memory lapses, the strange, dizzy spells, they all pointed to a truth I didn't want to face. I was slowly losing myself, and the process would likely be long and painful. 3 days later, the cognitive test results confirmed the doctor's suspicion: early-onset Alzheimer's disease. While the symptoms were currently mild, they would gradually worsen. "Mrs. Miller," the doctor said kindly, "maintaining a positive attitude is very important. Participating in social activities, keeping your mind active, reading, doing crafts can all help slow the progression." "Crafts?" I looked down at my calloused hands. Sewing had been my life's work. Now, it might just be my lifeline. On the day I was discharged, Michael and Claire came to pick me up. To my surprise, Claire's attitude toward me had softened considerably. "Helen," she said in the car on the way home, "Michael and I talked it over. We'd like you to move in with us for a while, at least until you're feeling stronger." I saw Michael give his wife a grateful look in the rearview mirror. It seemed they had reached some kind of compromise. "Thank you for the offer," I said softly. "But I'd rather go back to my own home. It's closer to the hospital, and my friends are nearby." End quote. "Mom," Michael said, his voice pleading, "the doctor said you can't be alone. I can hire a part-time caregiver," I insisted. "Someone to come for a few hours a day to help with cooking and cleaning. Michael, I've been independent my whole life. Suddenly living with young people, I just feel out of place." What I didn't say was that I didn't want to become a burden and a source of conflict in my son's marriage. How long would Claire's newfound kindness last? What would happen when my condition worsened and I needed long-term care? In the end, Michael reluctantly agreed to my decision, but he insisted on coming to see me every day after work. Claire promised to help me find a reliable caregiver. Back in my familiar little apartment, I let out a long sigh of relief. The antiseptic smell of the hospital had been suffocating. It was good to be home, even if this home would soon become unfamiliar because of my illness. In the days that followed, I tried to maintain a normal life. The caregiver Michael found was a woman from Louisiana in her 50s, efficient and not too talkative, which suited me perfectly. Claire would occasionally come with Michael, always bringing some nutritional supplements. She was polite but distant, but at least there was no longer any hostility. One day, she even brought up the quilted vest herself. "Helen," she asked cautiously, "did you really make that vest from Michael's old baby clothes?" I nodded and took the vest out of the closet to show her. Claire gently touched each patch of fabric as I explained its origin. "This piece is from the blanket he came home from the hospital in," I said, pointing to a pale blue cotton square. "This plaid fabric was from the shirt he wore on his first day of school. This navy corduroy was from his middle school graduation." Claire's eyes lit up. "Helen, that's so meaningful. This kind of craft is really popular overseas now. They call it a memory quilt. One can sell for thousands of dollars." I looked at her, surprised. You like this? For the first time, she showed a genuine smile. I saw an exhibition of similar works when I was studying abroad. Helen, your skill is so good, you could turn this into a brand. End of. It was the first time I had seen Claire show any real interest in or respect for me. Maybe quilt making could become a bridge between us. That night, I made a decision. I would take up my sewing work again, not just to slow the progression of my illness, but to rediscover my own value and dignity. The next day, I pulled out my long, unused Singer sewing machine and began designing a series of quilted pieces, baby blankets, aprons, decorative wall hangings. Each piece was infused with years of memories and my understanding of life. Michael was thrilled to see me rediscover my passion. Mom, you should have done this ages ago. Claire even said she could help promote it on her social media. I smiled and shook my head. Let's just focus on making them first. If I'm going to sell them, they have to be perfect. In truth, I had a bigger plan in mind. I wanted to make a complete set of quilted items for my unborn grandchild, from birth to their first birthday, each one pieced together from the fabric of Michael's childhood clothes. It would be a continuation of my love, a way to reconnect with my family. However, just as I was immersing myself in this warm and hopeful project, fate dealt me another heavy blow. It was an ordinary afternoon. I was sewing a quilted baby onesie when I suddenly found my fingers wouldn't obey me. The needle moved crookedly across the fabric, the stitches uneven, nothing like my usual precise work. Worse, I stared at the fabric for a long time and couldn't remember what the next step was. Panic washed over me like a tidal wave. I reached for the phone with trembling hands but couldn't remember Michael's number. It was the caregiver who came home and found me in distress, and she quickly called him. By the time Michael rushed over, I had calmed down and my memory had returned. But the terrifying feeling of losing control lingered. Mom, we can't put this off any longer, Michael said, his eyes red. You have to move in with us. Today it was just forgetting something. What if next time you forget to turn off the gas? This time, I didn't refuse, because in that brief moment of confusion, a horrifying thought had crossed my mind. What if, one day, I can't even recognize my own son? All right, I agreed softly, but I have one condition. Give me a small, separate space for my sewing machine and my fabrics. Working with my hands helps keep my mind clear. Michael hugged me tightly. Of course, Mom. Anything you want. And so, in my 60th year, after the turmoil of the wedding and a health crisis, I packed my belongings and prepared to move into my son's home to begin an unknown journey. I didn't know how Alzheimer's would change me or what challenges I would face living with my daughter-in-law. But I knew one thing. As long as my hands could hold a needle, I would continue to sew my love and memories into every piece I made. And even if, one day, I forgot everything, those stitches would remember for me how deeply I had loved my child and my family. The day I moved, the sky was a heavy gray, as if it might collapse upon the city. Michael took the day off work and borrowed an SUV to help me move my things. My old Singer sewing machine and several large boxes of fabric took up the most space, nearly filling the entire trunk. Mom, do you really need to bring all this fabric? Michael asked, looking at the boxes with a touch of helplessness. Claire said we could buy you new material. This isn't just fabric, I said, gently stroking a faded cardboard box. Every piece has a story. Michael didn't press the issue. He had learned to respect the emotional connection I had with these materials. Claire didn't come to help, saying she was suffering from severe morning sickness, but I could tell she was still resistant to the idea of me moving in. Who would want their mother-in-law to move in so soon after getting married, especially one with whom she'd had such a difficult start? Michael's home was in an upscale neighborhood, a modern and spacious 3-bedroom apartment. My room was the guest bedroom, already tidied and clean, with a south-facing window that let in plenty of light. This one is farther from the master bedroom, so you won't be disturbed, Michael said as he helped me with the boxes. Claire said you can decorate it however you like. I noticed how often he quoted Claire. It seemed that in this house, many decisions required his wife's approval. Michael, I don't want to be a burden to you two, I said, putting down a suitcase. If there's anything that makes you uncomfortable, you have to tell me. Michael put an arm around my shoulders. Mom, this is your home now. Claire and I agreed. You can stay as long as you want." His tone was sincere, but I could sense a hint of uncertainty. Marriage is a partnership between two people. Adding a third inevitably disrupts the balance. I could only pray for a smooth transition. Claire didn't emerge from the master bedroom until dinner time. She was wearing comfortable lounge clothes, her face a little pale, but her makeup was still immaculate. "Helen," she said with a polite smile. "Welcome. I hope you'll be comfortable here." "Thank you. I'm sorry for the intrusion," I said, handing her a beautifully wrapped gift box. "It's just a little something I made. A housewarming gift of sorts." Curiosity piqued. Claire unwrapped the gift. Inside was a quilted apron. The navy blue base was patched with various geometric patterns, and a delicate rose was embroidered on the pocket. "This is," Claire said, touching the apron in amazement. "It's all hand-stitched. The stitches are so fine." "Mom's always been incredible with a needle," Michael said proudly. "She made all my clothes when I was a kid." Claire looked at the apron thoughtfully, then did something unexpected. She put it on. "Perfect. I'm making dinner tonight," she announced. "I'll give it a try." Michael and I exchanged a look of surprise. As far as I knew, Claire almost never cooked. They usually ordered takeout or had a part-time housekeeper prepare their meals. In the kitchen, Claire chopped vegetables awkwardly. I couldn't help but step in to guide her. "Hold the knife like this. Use your wrist." To my surprise, she wasn't impatient. She followed my instructions with genuine interest. The dinner was simple, but the atmosphere was much more harmonious than I had expected. Afterwards, Michael did the dishes while Claire and I sat in the living room. In the midst of an awkward silence, she suddenly asked, "Helen, how did you learn to sew?" The question opened a floodgate of memories. I told her that my mother had been the village seamstress, and I had grown up playing in piles of fabric scraps. By 12, I could make a shirt on my own, and by 16, I could replicate fashions from magazines. After the economic reforms, I went to work in a garment factory in the city, where I met Michael's father. "What happened then?" Claire asked, clearly intrigued by my story. "Then, his father passed away from an illness, leaving Michael and me on our own," I said, glossing over those difficult years. "Sewing became how we survived." Claire was silent for a moment, then said, "Helen, have you ever thought about opening a studio? With your skill, you could do high-end custom work." I laughed. "At my age? I don't have the energy for that anymore. Just doing some crafts to keep my hands and mind busy is enough." "No, I'm serious." Claire's eyes lit up. "I work in marketing, and I know a lot of people in the fashion industry. Handmade quilts, especially pieces with a personal story, are very popular right now." And just like that, we had our first real conversation. I discovered that, setting aside the tension of our relationship, Claire was a smart and business-savvy young woman, and she, in turn, seemed to see me in a new light, not just as a dowdy mother-in-law, but as a woman with a story and a skill. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed and listening to the rain pattering against the window, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, living under the same roof, we could truly find a way to coexist peacefully. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of a fierce argument. "How many times have I told you to squeeze the toothpaste from the bottom? Your mother has only been here for 1 day, and you're already getting sloppy." Claire's voice was sharp and piercing. "Keep your voice down. Mom will hear you," Michael whispered back. "I don't care. And another thing, those boxes of fabric have taken over the entire storage closet. There's no room for my workout equipment." I curled up under the covers, my heart aching. It had only been 1 day, and I was already the cause of their fights. I quietly got out of bed and decided to take a walk in the nearby park to give them some space. The park was quiet in the early morning. I sat on a bench, staring at the mist rising from the lake. My phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, where are you?" he asked, his voice full of anxiety. "I woke up and you were gone." "I'm just taking a walk in the park," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "The morning air is nice. How is Ixtal?" "Oh," he said, seeming relieved. "Listen, Claire is, with the pregnancy, her emotions are all over the place. If she said anything this morning, don't take it to heart." "I didn't hear a thing," I lied. "Michael, I don't want to be a burden. If there's ever a problem, you have to tell me." When I got back to the apartment, Claire had already left for work. Michael explained that something urgent had come up at the office. We both tacitly avoided mentioning the morning's argument. In the days that followed, I tried to make myself as inconspicuous as possible. While they were at work, I stayed in my room quilting or went for walks. By the time they came home in the evening, I would have a simple dinner ready. Gradually, Claire stopped criticizing my home cooking and even started complimenting a few of the dishes she liked. But beneath the calm surface, an undercurrent of tension remained. I noticed Michael growing quieter, with dark circles under his eyes. Claire's moods would swing from overly friendly to ice cold, and my own memory problems were getting worse. Sometimes I would forget to turn off the faucet or ask the same question multiple times. One weekend afternoon, things finally came to a head. I was in the living room, organizing some of my finished quilts, when Claire came home with a few of her friends for tea. They were all amazed by my work, and one of her friends even offered to buy a piece for a high price. "Helen's skills have been passed down in her family," Claire announced proudly. "You rarely see this kind of traditional quilting anymore." I was flattered and immediately offered to give her friend one of the smaller pieces as a gift. However, as soon as her guests left, Claire's expression turned sour. "Helen," she said coldly, "in the future, please do not promise to give things away without my permission. She is my friend, and that creates a social obligation for me." I was stunned. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize." "And another thing," she continued, "can you please organize your fabrics? Mrs. Thompson almost tripped over one of your boxes in the hallway. This is an upscale building, not your old rundown apartment." Every word was like a knife in my heart. I nodded silently, gathered my things, and went back to my room. That evening, I told Michael what had happened, hoping he could gently remind Claire to be more mindful of her words. I never imagined it would trigger their most explosive fight yet. I heard things being thrown in the master bedroom and Claire's piercing screams. "You only ever think about your mother's feelings. Have you ever thought about mine? This is my house. She's my mother, and she's been trying her best to adapt. Then make her move out. I can't take it anymore." I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking. The thing I had feared most had happened. I had become the destroyer of my son's marriage. That night, I tossed and turned, and finally made a painful decision. The next morning, after they left for work, I started to pack my bags. I wouldn't wait for the conflict to escalate beyond repair. I would leave while I still had some dignity left. I was halfway through packing when the doorbell rang. Standing outside was a well-dressed, middle-aged man holding a fruit basket. "Excuse me, is this the home of Mrs. Helen Miller?" he asked politely. I nodded. "I'm Helen Miller." "Mrs. Miller, hello. My name is Edward Hayes," he said, handing me a business card. "Claire's father." I took the card in surprise and invited him in. Edward Hayes carried himself with an air of sophistication, but his eyes were sharp, the look of a shrewd businessman. "Mrs. Miller, I'll be direct," he said, sitting down. "I'm here about the situation between you and my daughter." My heart sank. It seemed Claire had complained to her father. "Mr. Hayes," I said bluntly, "I was just about to move out. I don't want to interfere in the children's lives." He shook his head. "You misunderstand. I'm not here to ask you to leave. On the contrary, I'm here to ask for your help." What he said next left me speechless. "You misunderstand," he repeated. "I'm not here to ask you to leave. On the contrary, I'm here to ask for your help." Oh. Edward's words left me frozen, my fingers gripping the armrest of the sofa. The sunlight streaming through the window cast his profile in silhouette, outlining a shape that was hauntingly familiar. A wave of dizziness washed over me, not from my Alzheimer's, but because his face, the shape of his eyes, the set of his brow superimposed itself over an image from deep within my memory. "Mr. Hayes, I don't understand," he stammered. Edward reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a faded photograph, gently pushing it across the coffee table toward me. "Helen Miller, it's been 35 years. You've changed, but the spirit in your eyes is exactly the same." The photograph was of two young people, taken in the 1980s, with a scenic lake in the background. The girl wore her hair in braids and a simple floral dress. The boy wore thick-rimmed glasses, his white shirt tucked into olive green trousers. It was me, and Edward Hayes. No, back then, his name was Eddie. He was the young manager from corporate who had been assigned to the garment factory where I worked. Eddie, the name escaped my lips, coated in the dust of more than 3 decades. Edward, no. Eddie's eyes grew moist. I can't believe you still remember that name. I changed it before I went abroad. Edward sounded better for business. Memories flooded back. The summer of 1985, at a textile mill in North Carolina. I was a new temp worker, and he was a young manager sent down from the head office. We fell in love, but his family was vehemently opposed. His father was a senior executive, while I was just a girl from a small country town. Eventually, his family arranged for him to study overseas, and we were forced to part. The last time we met, he secretly slipped me a bus ticket, begging me to run away with him. But I refused because my mother was sick and needed me to take care of her. My mother was sick, I murmured, my fingers tracing the 2 young faces in the photograph. Eddie nodded. I had someone ask about you later. They told me you had gotten married, had a child. My husband passed away from an illness a long time ago, leaving me to raise our son on my own, I said with a sad smile. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? A long silence fell between us. The sunbeam crept across the floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Helen, Eddie said, suddenly taking my hand, I never imagined that Claire's mother-in-law would be you. The other day, she came home crying, saying her husband's mother had embarrassed her at the wedding. When she mentioned a quilted patchwork vest, I had a feeling it might be you. I pulled my hand away. So, you're here today to apologize? His voice was low. For my daughter's rudeness and for my own cowardice 35 years ago. I didn't fight my family's pressure. I let you down. I shook my head. That's all in the past. Now you're a successful businessman, and I'm a retired old woman. Our children have their own families. No, Helen. Eddie's gaze was intense. Fate has given us a second chance. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and I can see that life hasn't been easy for you. His words stung. He was right, it hadn't been easy. The hardship of raising a son alone, the shadow of Alzheimer's, the tension with my daughter-in-law. But I had never asked for pity. Mr. Hayes, I said, deliberately using his formal name to create distance. If you're here to reminisce, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. My main concern right now is how not to be a burden to Michael. Eddie sighed. Let me be frank. Claire lost her mother when she was very young, and I spoiled her. She has a strong personality, but she's fragile inside. Her hostility toward you is partly because she's afraid of losing Michael's attention. I can understand that. But she's been changing lately, he continued. She's starting to take an interest in your quilting. She even asked me if I would invest in a studio for you. I thought, maybe this could be an opportunity. An opportunity for what? For you two to reconcile, he said earnestly. Helen, your craft is a precious gift. Claire has a good business sense, and I have the resources. Why not do something together? It would give you financial independence and a social circle, which would help slow the progression of your illness. I fell into deep thought. Eddie's suggestion made sense. Crafting would exercise my brain, social interaction would ease my loneliness, and financial independence would reduce my reliance on my children. But working with my daughter-in-law, it sounded like a fantasy. I need to think about it, I finally said. Eddie stood up. Of course. He handed me a note with a number on it. This is my personal cell. Call me anytime. And as for Claire, don't tell her we know each other yet. I'll explain when the time is right. After he left, I sat on the sofa, my mind in turmoil. How ironic that the father of my daughter-in-law was my first love. Even more ironic was that we were separated because our families were from different worlds, and now his own daughter looked down on me for the same reason. Just as I was lost in my memories, the sound of a key in the lock pulled me back to the present. Claire stumbled in, her face pale, one hand pressed against the wall. Helen, she called out weakly. I don't feel well. I rushed to support her and felt that her forehead was burning hot, her palms clammy with cold sweat. Where's Michael? I asked urgently. He's on a business trip. Left this morning, she said with difficulty. I thought it was just morning sickness. I felt her forehead. It was terrifyingly hot. "We have to go to the hospital." I immediately grabbed the phone and called for an ambulance. While we waited, I helped Claire change into loose clothing and packed a hospital bag. She was curled up on the bed in pain, yet stubbornly insisted, "I don't need a hospital, I just need to rest." "No," I said with uncharacteristic firmness. "A high fever is very dangerous for a pregnant woman." Although, when the ambulance arrived, the paramedics quickly assessed Claire and suspected a urinary tract infection was causing the fever. She needed to be hospitalized immediately. I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her trembling hand the whole way. In the emergency room, the doctors confirmed it was an acute kidney infection and she needed antibiotics immediately. "But some antibiotics can affect the fetus," the doctor said grimly. "We need a family member to sign the consent form." "And Claire weakly shook her head. "Wait for my husband." "When will he be back?" the doctor asked. "Tomorrow evening." Claire's voice was faint. The doctor frowned. "We can't wait that long. Her condition could worsen." "I'll sign." I stepped forward. "I'm her mother-in-law." Claire looked at me, surprised. The doctor hesitated. "We usually require an immediate family member. Her father is out of the country, her mother passed away, and her husband is on a business trip," I said firmly. "Right now, I am the closest family she has. I will take full responsibility." Perhaps seeing the determination in my eyes, the doctor finally agreed. After signing the forms, I called Michael and Eddie, then sat by Claire's bedside. Looking at her pale face and slightly swollen belly, I felt a surge of protectiveness. After the IV drip started, Claire's fever began to subside. In a state between sleep and wakefulness, she suddenly grabbed my hand. "Helen, why are you being so good to me?" I gently wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Silly girl, you're my daughter-in-law, and you're carrying my grandchild. Who else would I be good to?" A single tear rolled down from the corner of her eye. "But I was so awful to you." "Don't talk about the past," I patted her hand. "Just rest now, I'm right here." The night grew late. The only sounds in the room were the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and Claire's steady breathing. I gazed at the moonlight outside the window, remembering what Eddie's mother had said to me 35 years ago. "You're not from the same world. You two will never work out." Now history was repeating itself, only the roles were reversed. Was the class divide truly an insurmountable chasm in love and family? In the early morning hours, Eddie rushed to the hospital. Seeing his daughter sleeping peacefully, he let out a sigh of relief, then turned to me. "Thank you, Helen." "Don't thank me. She's my family too," I said, exhausted. Eddie handed me a cup of hot coffee. "You go get some rest. I'll stay with her." I shook my head. "Michael won't be back until tomorrow. I'll stay tonight. You have work in the morning. Go home." He hesitated, then finally nodded. "Call me if anything happens." After Eddie left, I continued my vigil. As dawn broke, Claire woke up. Seeing me still there, her eyes reddened. "Helen, you didn't sleep at all?" I smiled and poured her a glass of warm water. "I'm old. I don't need much sleep. Are you feeling better?" She nodded, taking small sips of water, then suddenly said, "Helen, I'm so sorry." I paused. "For what?" "For everything." Her voice choked. "For what I did at the wedding, for my attitude, for what I said when my friends were over, the things I said to you." I took her hand. "It's all in the past. The most important thing now is for you to get well and protect the baby." "You don't hate me?" she asked, her eyes filled with tears. "How could a mother-in-law hate her daughter-in-law?" I shook my head with a smile. "Families have bumps in the road. What matters is understanding each other." Claire suddenly broke down crying. "Helen, I'm actually so scared." "Scared of what?" "Of being a bad mother," she sobbed. "I grew up without a mom. I don't know how to be one. And when I saw how close you and Michael are, I was jealous. My heart ached for her. So that was it. Behind her hostility was this simple yet complex emotion. A girl who had lost her mother, jealous and desperate for the very mother. Son bond she saw. "Claire," I said, gently stroking her hair, "you're going to be a wonderful mother. A mother's love is an instinct. It doesn't need to be learned. And besides, You have me now." She fell into my arms, crying like a child. I held her, patting her back gently, just as I had comforted Michael so many years ago. In that moment, all the barriers and resentments between us dissolved, leaving only the most elemental connection between two women, one about to become a mother, and one who had raised her son all on her own. That afternoon, Michael rushed back to the hospital. When he saw his wife and mother getting along peacefully, he was speechless. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize your own wife and mom?" I teased. Michael's eyes reddened. "Mom, thank you." "For what? Isn't this what family is for?" I patted my son's shoulder. "You stay with Claire. I'm going home to make some nourishing soup." Walking out of the hospital, the early summer sun felt warm on my shoulders. I suddenly felt that maybe moving in with my son wasn't a bad thing after all. Maybe my Alzheimer's diagnosis wasn't just a sentence of despair. Maybe life always had unexpected turns. Back home, I started to make a rich chicken soup, adding goji berries, dates, and herbs. The kitchen filled with a fragrant aroma, and my mood was lighter than it had been in a long time. Just as I was tasting the soup for seasoning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello, is this Mrs. Helen Miller?" a young woman's voice asked. "It's Maya, the girl you met in the park." I immediately remembered her, the kind girl who had offered me comfort at my lowest point. "Maya, hello. How are you?" "Helen, I was calling to ask if you'd be interested in participating in our community's craft fair," Maya said excitedly. "I saw the quilted pieces you were working on, and they are absolutely beautiful. We have an event next month." Sometimes, fate is just that strange. When you open your heart, the whole world seems to extend a hand in friendship. I smiled and told her I would consider it, then went back to stirring the soup in the pot. Life, I thought, was just like this soup. It needed patience and love, simmered slowly over time, to bring out its richest flavor. After Claire was discharged from the hospital, the atmosphere at home changed dramatically. She was no longer cold or dismissive. Instead, she often sought me out to chat, asking about quilting techniques, and even offering to help me organize my boxes of fabric. "Helen, these fabrics are so old. Why do you still keep them?" she asked one afternoon, curiously looking through my collection of scraps. I picked up a faded blue plaid piece. This was from the shirt Michael wore in the first grade. He wore it when he won first place in the school's public speaking competition. I then pointed to a piece of red corduroy. This was from the pants he wore for his middle school honor society induction. He saved up his own money to buy the material, and I made them for him. "Oh," Claire gently touched the fabrics, her expression soft. "Helen, you remember everything so clearly." I gave a wry smile, not telling her that my memory was slowly slipping away, and that only these fragments related to my son remained, like seashells I had carefully collected on a beach. "Claire," I changed the subject, "about the studio your father mentioned, what do you think?" Her eyes lit up. "I think it's a fantastic idea. Helen, your craftsmanship is truly exceptional. We could start with small-scale custom orders, focusing on the memory quilt concept. Each piece would be infused with the client's personal story." I was amazed by her business acumen. "You know so much about this?" "I studied fashion marketing in England," she said with a smile. "I used to think traditional crafts were old-fashioned, but now I understand that the emotional value they hold is irreplaceable." And, seeing the excitement in my daughter-in-law's eyes, a flicker of hope ignited within me. Perhaps quilting could not only slow the progression of my illness, but also become the thread that connects 3 generations of our family. That evening, I shared the idea with Michael. He looked from me to Claire in surprise. "Are you two really going into business together?" "It's not a business, just a small studio," I said quickly. "Something to do that I enjoy, to keep my hands and mind active." "Oh, Mom, this is wonderful." Michael took my hands. "You know, the doctor said that staying engaged in creative activities is very helpful for slowing the symptoms of Alzheimer's." Claire nodded in agreement. "Helen, we can clear out a room here at home to use as a workshop for now. Once we get established, we can look for a proper storefront." Looking at the eager faces of my son and daughter-in-law, a warmth spread through me. Perhaps this is the meaning of family finding a new direction through mutual support. That weekend, Eddie came over for dinner. It was a planned event, a formal introduction for our two families to avoid arousing Claire's suspicions. At the dinner table, we played our parts as strangers meeting for the first time, but I could feel the complex emotions in his eyes every time our gazes met. "Mrs. Miller," he said, raising his wineglass with a serious expression, "Claire has told me about your incredible talent. I have great admiration for traditional craftsmanship. If you're interested, I would be happy to invest in your studio." "Thank you for your kind offer, Mr. Hayes," I replied, equally formally. "But I'd like to start small and see how the market responds." Claire chimed in, "Dad, Helen's work is truly special. There's a story in every stitch." Michael added his praise. "My mom's skill was famous back home. She made all my clothes when I was a kid, and all my friends were so envious." Eddie gave me a meaningful look. "I can see that Mrs. Miller is a woman of great heart." After dinner, Claire and Michael went to the kitchen, leaving Eddie and me alone in the living room. After a moment of silence, he asked in a low voice, "Helen, how has your health been?" "It's all right," I replied softly. "My memory comes and goes, but when I'm focused on my craft, my mind is surprisingly clear." "That's good," he hesitated. "About our past." "Let's not talk about it," I interrupted. "What's past is past. The most important thing now is our children's happiness." He nodded, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "You're right, but I'm very glad we've met again." Just as the atmosphere grew delicate, Claire came out of the kitchen with a plate of fruit. "Dad, Helen, what are you two talking about so intently?" "Just discussing the studio," Eddie quickly replied, his composure restored. "Claire, have you shown Mrs. Miller that retail space yet?" "What space?" Michael and I asked in unison. Claire smiled mysteriously. "Dad has a small shop in the Arts District, and the lease is up next month. I thought if Helen's studio takes off, we could move it there." I looked at Eddie in astonishment. He gave a slight smile. "It's a good location, lots of foot traffic. We can be flexible on the rent." "This is all so sudden," I stammered. "I'm not ready." "Helen," Claire said, sitting down next to me, "you don't have to worry about the business side of things. I'll handle that. You just need to focus on creating. Your quilts have real artistic value. More people should see them." Michael encouraged me as well. "Mom, just give it a try. Even if it doesn't work out, at least you'll have tried." Under the gaze of 3 pairs of expectant eyes, I finally nodded. "All right, let's give it a try." And just like that, my quilting studio project was officially launched. Claire was a whirlwind of action, immediately starting on renovation plans. Michael handled the legal paperwork and finances. As for me, I began to systematically organize my existing work and design new patterns. In the midst of all the activity, my Alzheimer's symptoms seemed to recede. Every day, I was focused on designing and sewing, and my mind felt unusually clear, my memory more solid. The doctor had said that creative activities could stimulate the brain to form new neural connections. Perhaps this was what they meant by use it or lose it. A week later, Maya came to visit, bringing the detailed plans for the community craft fair. "Helen," she said excitedly, "we want to feature your work as the main exhibit. The theme is Memories in the Stitches." "Aptu." Claire's eyes lit up. "That's a brilliant theme. It's the perfect preview for our studio." "What studio?" Maya asked curiously. When she learned about our plans, she clapped her hands in delight. "What a coincidence! I'm a graduate student at the Art Institute, and my specialty is the modern application of traditional crafts." "Helen, could I possibly intern at your studio? I'd love to learn traditional quilting techniques from you." "Oh." I looked at this enthusiastic young woman, remembering the warmth she had shown me at my lowest point. "Of course, you can," I said with a smile. "But I'm a very strict teacher." "No problem." Maya gave a playful salute. "A strict teacher produces great students." And so, my life suddenly became rich and colorful. Every morning, I woke up full of energy. After breakfast, I would start working in our makeshift studio. After work, Claire would come to discuss business plans. And on weekends, Maya would come to learn from me and help catalog my work. Occasionally, Eddie would stop by, bringing imported fabrics or design books. A month later, my work was a resounding success at the community craft fair. On the day of the event, I wore a quilted silk dress I had designed myself and stood by my pieces, accepting compliments from visitors and interviews from the media. The works on display included a wall hanging made from Michael's childhood clothes, a fabric portrait based on an old photo of Eddie and me, and a series of baby items for my unborn grandchild. Each piece told a story and touched the hearts of countless viewers. Mrs. Miller, a local TV reporter, asked during an interview, "What inspired you to integrate personal memories into the traditional art of quilting?" I looked at the camera and said calmly, "Life is like a quilt, pieced together from countless fragments. There is laughter and tears, reunion and separation. I use a needle and thread to stitch these fragments together, not for perfection, but for wholeness." My words were met with warm applause. In the crowd, I saw Michael's proud smile, Claire's emotional tears, Eddie's profound gaze, and Maya frantically taking pictures. In that moment, I felt a sense of fulfillment and happiness I had never known before. However, fate always seems to enjoy reminding me of my reality when I am at my happiest. During the reception after the exhibition, as I was accepting congratulations from several collectors, a familiar wave of dizziness washed over me. The scene before me began to distort, names vanished from my memory, and for a moment I couldn't even remember where I was. "Mrs. Miller, are you all right?" someone asked with concern. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Panic flooded me. I knew the Alzheimer's was flaring up, and in front of everyone. Just then, a strong arm supported me. "My wife is just feeling a little faint from low blood sugar." Eddie's voice sounded beside me. "Excuse us, we need to step away for a moment," and he half carried, half guided me to a quiet room and helped me into a chair, then handed me a glass of water. "Helen, take a deep breath. Don't panic." I took a sip of water with a trembling hand, trying to steady my breathing. Gradually, my thoughts began to clear. "Thank you," I whispered. "I didn't want to, in front of so many people." "I know." He knelt down to look me in the eye. "Helen, why didn't you tell the children your condition is getting worse?" I gave a weak smile. "They're so full of hope right now. The studio is just getting started. I don't want to extinguish that flame. But pushing yourself like this is more dangerous," Eddie said, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "If I hadn't noticed something was wrong today—" "Eddie," I said softly, using the name I hadn't spoken in years, "promise me you won't tell them. At least not yet. Just give me a little more time." He looked at me, then finally sighed. "All right, but you have to promise me you won't overwork yourself and that you'll go for regular checkups." I nodded. Just then, we heard footsteps outside the door. Claire and Michael had come looking for us, their faces etched with worry. "Helen, what happened?" Claire rushed over and took my hand. "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired," I said with a forced smile. Michael frowned. "Mom, you look very pale. Let's go home." "No," I shook my head. "There are still so many guests." "Leave it to Maya and me," Claire said firmly. "Michael, you take Helen home to rest." And so, my son escorted me home. On the way, he kept looking at me with concern. "Mom, did you have another memory lapse?" "No." I patted his hand. "I just stood for too long. My back is sore." Back at home, Michael insisted on staying with me. We sat on the balcony, looking out at the city lights, and talked about the past funny stories from his childhood, my difficult but hopeful years. Strangely, those distant memories were crystal clear, as if they had happened just yesterday. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, "no matter what happens, I will always be here with you." My heart tightened. "Why do you say that all of a sudden?" "I know your illness might get worse," his voice choked, "but don't be afraid. You won't have to face it alone." Tears streamed down my face. So, my son knew everything. He had simply chosen to protect my dignity and hope from the shadows. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the day's roller coaster of emotions, from the joy of the exhibition's success to the terror of the public episode, and finally, the quiet love of my family. Life truly is like one of my quilts, made of pieces of every color, bright and dark, happy and sad. But as long as the needle is in my hand, I can keep sewing, right up to the very last stitch. The success of the community exhibition fast-tracked the preparations for our studio. The space Eddie provided was in a prime location in the Arts District, small but with excellent natural light. Claire hired a designer who divided the space into a gallery, a workshop, and a small tea corner, creating a style that was modern and minimalist, yet retained a touch of traditional warmth. "Helen, what do you think of this logo design?" Claire asked one evening, excitedly showing me her tablet. It combined the elements of a needle, thread, and fabric to form the word memory. End of quote. I was touched by her thoughtfulness. "It's beautiful. It's so professional. Can I really run a studio like this?" "You just focus on creating," she said, taking my hand. "Leave the rest to me. Your work is the best advertisement we could ask for." Looking at the passion in my daughter-in-law's eyes, a warmth spread through me. Not long ago, this girl was a thorn in my side. Now, she was my staunchest supporter. Life's turns are strange and wonderful. During the renovation, I visited the site every day. While the construction workers were busy, I would sit on a makeshift stool and work on a new piece, a 100 Good Wishes quilt for my unborn grandchild. Each patch was cut from Michael's childhood clothes, infused with a mother's love and blessings. Maya came by almost every day, helping me catalog my work and documenting the inspiration and techniques for each piece. "Helen," she said, snapping photos, "we should record all of this. You could publish a book one day." "Don't be silly," I laughed. "It's just a homemade craft." "It's not," Maya said seriously. "You've elevated traditional quilting to an art form. Look at this color gradient, this pattern combination, it's so expressive." The young woman's enthusiasm was contagious, making me reevaluate the skills I had long taken for granted. Perhaps my needlework was more than just a means of survival. Perhaps it was an art form, a vessel for emotion. One rainy afternoon, Eddie stopped by the shop to check on the progress. Maya was out buying supplies, so it was just me, sewing the Good Wishes quilt. "What are you working on?" he asked, closing his umbrella and walking over. "A blanket for my future grandchild," I smiled, showing him the half-finished piece. "I'm using fabric from Michael's old clothes." Eddie gently touched the stitches on the quilt, his eyes soft. "Your hands are as skilled as ever." After a pause, he added, "Helen, I've been doing a lot of research on Alzheimer's disease." My needle stopped. "Eddie, we agreed." "I'm not trying to interfere," he explained quickly. "I just wanted to tell you that there are some new drugs and therapies that might help. I have some medical connections overseas if you need them." "Thank you," I said softly, "but I'm doing okay right now. When I'm working with my hands, my mind is surprisingly clear. The doctor said that's the best therapy." "Oh." He nodded, not pushing the matter. After a moment of silence, he asked suddenly, "Do you remember the first time we met?" I looked up, my gaze drifting past the rain-streaked window as if back 35 years. It was at a social event organized by the factory's youth league. You were the new manager, giving a speech. The cuff of your white shirt had an ink stain on it. Eddie's eyes lit up. "You remember that so clearly." End quote. "And after that," I smiled at the memory, "you often found excuses to inspect the workshop, just to get a glimpse of me. One time, I pricked my finger with a needle, and you were so nervous you almost called an ambulance." We looked at each other and smiled, lost in our shared memories. The rain grew heavier, drumming against the window pane, creating a small, insulated world for just the two of us. "Helen," Eddie said suddenly, his voice low, "all these years, I've wondered if I had been braver back then, if I had ignored my family's objections." "Eddie," I interrupted, "there are no what-ifs in life. We both have our own families and children now. The way things are is fine." He looked at me intently, then finally sighed. "You're right. It's just, seeing you in your current situation, I can't help but wonder." The doorbell chimed, and Maya returned with supplies, breaking the spell. Eddie quickly resumed his role as an elder, asking a few questions about the studio's progress before taking his leave. Maya watched his retreating figure curiously. "Helen, Mr. Hayes is so kind to you." I lowered my head and continued sewing. "He's just doing it for Claire's sake." "Is he?" Maya said thoughtfully. "I don't know. The way he looks at you seems different." My heart skipped a beat. I changed the subject. "So, which pieces do we need to catalog today?" The day the studio officially opened, the sun was shining brightly. Claire had planned a small opening ceremony and invited many people from the media and the industry. I wore a quilted silk dress I had designed myself and stood at the door to greet the guests, feeling both nervous and excited. "Helen!" Maya ran over, beaming. "The TV station is here. They want to interview you, and the Craft magazine wants to do a feature story." I looked at Claire in surprise. She winked. "I sent out a few press releases. I didn't expect such a great response." During the interviews and tours, my quilts received endless praise. The pieces that incorporated personal memories were particularly moving: the wall hanging made from Michael's baby clothes, the fabric art that replicated old photographs, and even a jacket pieced together from various work uniforms, telling the story of an ordinary working woman's life. "Mrs. Miller," an art critic said, taking my hand, "your work transcends the category of traditional craft. It has reached the level of emotional art. Stitched into these threads is the collective memory of a generation." Such high praise was overwhelming. I had never imagined my needlework would be called art, let alone that I would one day stand in the spotlight, receiving applause. Just as the event was in full swing, I saw a familiar face in the crowd: my old colleague from the factory, Patty, whom I hadn't seen in years. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes filled with tears. "Helen, it really is you." I saw the report on TV and came as fast as I could. "Patty?" I exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "How many years has it been?" "Over 20 years, Patty patted my back. "Your son is all grown up, and he married such a beautiful wife." She looked around and lowered her voice. "Is that Mr. Hayes, the same young manager from back then?" My heart pounded. I never thought Patty would recognize Eddie after all this time. Back then, our romance had been the talk of the factory, ending with his sudden transfer. "Shh," I said, nervously glancing around. "Don't say anything." Patty nodded knowingly. "Don't worry, I get it." She touched the quilts on display. "Helen, you finally made it. You were always the most talented one in the workshop. It's a shame." "It's not a shame," I interrupted with a smile. "Every experience is a treasure. Without those years of hard work, I wouldn't have the pieces I have today." End of quote. Patty nodded, her eyes red. "You're right. The old gang will be so happy to hear how well you're doing." Her words made me think of my other former colleagues. In those years of scarcity, we women supported each other, sharing fabric scraps and techniques, finding small joys in our monotonous work. Maybe I should find the time to visit them. The opening was a huge success, and the studio became an instant hit. In the following days, orders and inquiries poured in. Claire decided to take a leave of absence from her job to manage the studio full-time. Maya became our first official employee, responsible for client communication and archiving the work. In the midst of the hustle and bustle, my mental state was surprisingly good. The Alzheimer's symptoms seemed to have retreated. The doctor had said that a positive attitude and a regular routine were crucial for managing the disease. Now, I had clear goals every day: the companionship of family and colleagues, and a constant stream of creative inspiration. This life was indeed the best medicine. But the good times didn't last. A little over a month later, I arrived at the studio one morning to find that I couldn't open the door. Upon closer inspection, I saw the lock had been filled with superglue. "What happened?" Maya asked in shock when she arrived. "We called building security to open the door, and the scene inside left us horrified. The display shelves were overturned, fabric was strewn everywhere, several finished pieces had been slashed with a knife, and on the wall, spray-painted in red, were the words fraud and thief." "Oh my God!" Maya gasped, covering her mouth, tears welling up. "Who did this? Why?" My legs went weak, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Among the destroyed pieces was the one I had been preparing for an upcoming national craft competition, a piece that had taken me 2 full weeks of painstaking work. The police arrived quickly, took our statements, and checked the security footage. But because the building's surveillance system was being upgraded, the footage from the previous night was missing. With no leads, the case was at a standstill. Claire and Michael rushed over. Seeing the vandalized studio, they were both furious. "It must be a competitor," Claire said through clenched teeth. "We've taken on a lot of high-end custom orders lately. We must have cut into someone else's business." Michael was more concerned about my well-being. "Mom, don't be too upset. We can remake the pieces. I shook my head, unable to speak. It wasn't just the work that had been destroyed, it was my heart and my memories. Some of the fabrics were irreplaceable, vintage pieces that held special meaning. As we stood there, helpless, Eddie arrived. When he saw the scene, his face grew dark. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a targeted, personal attack. "Dad, how do you know?" Claire asked, confused. Eddie didn't answer her directly. Instead, he asked me, "Helen, have you received any threats or strange messages lately?" I searched my memory and shook my head. "No, nothing." "Mr. Hayes," Maya suddenly spoke up. "Yesterday, a woman came into the shop. She wanted to commission a quilt but insisted on using specific fabrics. When Helen told her those fabrics were no longer available, she got very angry and left." "What did she look like?" Eddie asked immediately. Maya described her, in her 40s, fashionably dressed with a slight southern accent, and she said her last name was Wallace. Eddie's expression turned even darker. "Janice Wallace." "Dad, you know her?" Claire asked in surprise. Eddie took a deep breath. "She is my late wife's cousin." The statement dropped like a bomb in the room. We were all stunned. Eddie's late wife. Wasn't that Claire's biological mother? "Wait," Claire's voice trembled. "Mom passed away years ago. Why would her cousin come and destroy Helen's studio?" Eddie looked at his daughter, then at me, as if steeling himself to reveal something. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Helen Miller, you think you can wash away your past just because you've latched onto someone wealthy? Don't forget you were fired from the garment factory for stealing fabric. If you know what's good for you, you'll shut down that studio, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." My hands started to shake and my vision blurred. Stealing fabric? Fired? It was a complete lie. I had left the factory for family reasons, but my record was spotless. "Helen, what is it?" Eddie asked with concern. I silently handed him my phone. His face turned to stone. "It's her, all right, that crazy woman." "What is going on?" Michael demanded. "Mom, did you know Mr. Hayes before all this?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on Eddie and me. The secret we had kept for 35 years was finally about to be revealed. Eddie took my hand and said firmly, "It's time to tell the children the truth." I looked at him, then at the bewildered faces of Michael and Claire, and the curious eyes of Maya. I finally nodded. "Michael, Claire," I took a deep breath. "Your father and I, we were in love 35 years ago. We were in love 35 years ago." The words landed in the quiet room like a stone dropped into a still pond, sending ripples of shock through everyone. Michael and Claire stared, their eyes wide with disbelief, looking back and forth between me and Eddie. Maya covered her mouth, her own eyes even wider. "What?" Claire was the first to speak. "Dad, you and Helen?" Eddie nodded, his expression somber. "It was 1985. I was a young manager at a textile mill in North Carolina, and Helen was a worker on the factory floor. We fell in love, but we were forced to separate because of my family's objections." "Ender, family objections?" Michael frowned. "Because Mom was a factory worker?" "Not just that," I said with a bitter smile. Eddie's father was a senior executive, and I was just a temp worker from a small town. We were from different worlds. Claire's face was pale. "So, if it weren't for your families, you might have gotten married. And then I wouldn't have been born." "Claire," Eddie said, putting an arm around his daughter, "there are no what-ifs in life. I married your mother, and we had you. That is a precious gift in its own right." "Then why would Mom's cousin target Helen?" Claire pressed. Eddie sighed. "Janice was always fiercely loyal to your mother. After she passed, Janice somehow found out about my history with Helen. When she discovered that Helen was now your mother-in-law, she must have seen it as a betrayal of your mother's memory." I looked at Eddie in shock. "So she spread rumors and vandalized the studio? All for revenge?" "It's more than that," Eddie said gravely. "She has always hoped I would marry her daughter, your cousin, Claire. Helen's reappearance in my life ruined her plans. The tangled web of relationships left everyone speechless. I never imagined that a love affair from 35 years ago could cause such chaos today. Michael suddenly stepped to my side and took my hand. Mom, no matter what happened in the past, I'm on your side. Claire looked at her father, then at me, her expression complicated. So, you and Dad meeting again was a coincidence? Yes, I said firmly. It wasn't until after your wedding that your father realized I was Michael's mother. And the studio was purely because I admire Helen's talent, Eddie added. It had nothing to do with our past. Claire took a deep breath, seemingly processing all this new information. Finally, she walked over to me. Helen, I am so sorry. I can't believe a member of my family has caused you so much trouble. I shook my head. It's not your fault, but I suppose the studio will have to close for a while. No, Claire's voice was suddenly strong. We will not give in to such despicable tactics. Dad, can you handle things with Aunt Janice? Eddie nodded grimly. Leave her to me. Good, Claire said, looking around the devastated room. We'll clean this up and repair what we can. The competition piece that was destroyed. Helen, is it possible to remake it? I looked at the slashed pieces of fabric, my heart aching. There's not enough time. The deadline is next week. I can help, Maya said suddenly. Helen, my skills are nothing compared to yours, but I can handle the basic stitching. If we work day and night, we might be able to finish it. Michael joined in. Mom, I can help too. I can't sew, but I can be an extra pair of hands. Looking at the eager faces of these young people, the darkness in my heart began to lift. They were right. I couldn't let this defeat me, not when I had so much support. All right, I said, straightening my back. Let's give it a try. For the next few days, we worked like a small, dedicated army. Claire handled all the external communications and material sourcing, while Michael took care of all the physical labor and errands. Maya became my right-hand woman, completing the foundational sewing according to my instructions, while I focused on the most intricate design and patchwork. After dealing with his family matters, Eddie often came by to help, sometimes bringing rare fabrics, other times just sitting quietly in a corner, watching us work. Whenever our eyes met, he would offer an encouraging smile. Strangely, under this intense pressure, my Alzheimer's symptoms seemed to lessen. When I was focused on creating, my mind was sharp, my memory solid. The doctor's use it or lose it theory was proving true. The brain, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. Late on the 6th night, when the final stitch was complete, we were all too exhausted to speak. The new piece was even more beautiful than the original, infused with the special memory of overcoming this hardship together. It's breathtaking, Maya whispered, stroking the finished quilt, her voice choked with emotion. Helen, this is definitely a winning piece. Claire took photos and sent them to several industry experts, receiving overwhelmingly positive feedback. Even the usually reserved Michael had red eyes as he said, Mom, this is the most amazing piece of craftsmanship I've ever seen. The day before the competition, we delivered the piece to the organizers. On the drive back, a collective sigh of relief filled the car, and we began to discuss the studio's reconstruction. Helen, Claire said excitedly, this incident has actually brought us more attention. Several media outlets want to interview you to tell the story of a traditional artisan facing adversity. I don't know about that, I hesitated. Airing our dirty laundry in public? It's not about family drama, Claire explained. It's about the perseverance and innovation of a traditional craftswoman. Look, this is the interview outline from the city's culture magazine. I looked at the list of questions. They were indeed all focused on the heritage and innovation of the craft. Perhaps this crisis could truly be turned into an opportunity. On the day of the competition, the exhibition hall was packed. My piece, titled River of Memory, was displayed in a prominent location. It was a large fabric mural, pieced together from hundreds of fabrics of different colors and textures, depicting a river flowing from a snow-capped mountain to the vast ocean, symbolizing the journey of life and memory. The judges spent a long time in front of my work, speaking in low tones. I watched them touch the texture of the fabric, examine the stitches on the back, their expressions shifting from surprise to admiration. In the end, the result was something no one expected. I won the Special Innovation Award. In his speech, the head judge said, "This work elevates the traditional craft of quilting to the level of high art. Every stitch is imbued with emotion. Every piece of fabric carries a memory. It is a perfect fusion of skill and soul. Standing on the stage, looking out at the applauding faces of Michael, Claire, Maya, and Eddie, I was too moved to speak. In that moment, all the hardship and pain felt worthwhile. In the interviews that followed, a reporter asked what advice I had for young artisans. I thought for a moment and said, "Hold on to what you love, and love what you hold on to. A craft is not just a way to make a living, it is an expression of the heart. No matter what difficulties you face, never give up the power to create beauty." My words were quoted by several media outlets, and my studio's fame grew. Orders flew in like snowflakes. We had to start a waiting list. After the storm, the studio was renovated and reopened, more spacious and bright than before. Claire resigned from her corporate job to become the full-time studio manager. Maya officially became my assistant and apprentice, and Michael handled our finances and legal affairs. Our small team worked together seamlessly, and the business thrived. Eddie was a frequent visitor to the studio, sometimes bringing rare fabrics, other times just sitting and watching. We maintained a comfortable distance, not as passionate as we were in our youth, but not as formal as strangers. The 35 years between us had built an invisible wall, but we had learned to watch over each other from either side. One weekend afternoon, Claire had a sudden proposal. "Helen, I want to learn how to quilt. Will you teach me?" I looked at her, surprised. Why the sudden interest? She gently touched her growing belly. "I want to make something for the baby, just like you did for Michael." My heart melted. This once pampered girl was learning to be a mother, and she wanted to express her love in the most traditional way. "Of course," I smiled. "We'll start with the most basic stitches." And so, Claire began her quilting lessons. Her hands weren't naturally nimble, but she was incredibly diligent, often practicing late into the night. Watching her focused profile, I was reminded of myself learning to sew just as clumsy, just as determined. A month later, she finished her first piece, a small quilted bib made from the fabric of Michael's old baby clothes. "Helen, what do you think?" she asked nervously. I examined the stitches. They weren't perfectly even, but they were strong. "It's wonderful," I praised her sincerely. "The baby will love it." She beamed, a smile so pure it reminded me of her father in his youth. That evening, I was working late at the studio, sorting through a new batch of fabric. Suddenly, a familiar wave of dizziness hit me, and the world began to tilt. I grabbed the workbench to steady myself, but knocked over a box of needles. "Helen!" Eddie's voice came from the doorway. He rushed over to support me. "Is it happening again?" I nodded, a cold sweat breaking out on my brow. This episode was worse than before. For a moment, I couldn't even remember where I was. Eddie helped me to a chair and poured me a glass of hot water. "You have to tell the children. This is too dangerous." "Just a little longer," I said weakly. "The studio is just getting on its feet, and Claire is pregnant." "Helen," he said, his voice firm, "they have a right to know the truth, especially Michael. He's your son." I was silent for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Wait until Claire is past her second trimester. The baby isn't stable yet." Eddie sighed, but didn't argue. He helped me pick up the scattered needles and then said, "Let me take you home." Walking through the cool night air, he asked suddenly, "Helen, if I had insisted on taking you with me all those years ago, what do you think would have happened?" I stopped and looked at his still handsome profile under the streetlight. "Eddie, there's no going back in life. The way things are now, it's good." He gave a sad smile. "Yes, at least we can still be friends." Friends. The word felt both intimate and distant. 35 years ago, we were lovers. 35 years later, we were family, connected by a lifetime of experiences and the lives of our children. But no matter what, to have met again in the second half of our lives was a gift from fate. When I got home, Michael and Claire were already asleep. I tiptoed through my evening routine, then sat on the edge of my bed, looking through Michael's childhood photo albums. In those frozen moments of time were the countless small memories of a mother and son surviving against the odds. No matter how much my memory faded, these precious moments would forever be etched in my heart. The next morning, I received a call from the hospital. They were inviting me to participate in a clinical trial for a new Alzheimer's drug. They said it had shown promising results in slowing memory decline in early-stage patients, but it required the consent of a family member. After hanging up, I was lost in thought. Participating in the trial meant finally telling Michael the full extent of my condition, but perhaps this was the right time. The studio was stable. Claire was past her first trimester, and our family was at peace. Just as I was hesitating, my phone rang again. It was Claire. "Helen, can you come to the hospital? I'm bleeding a little." My heart leaped into my throat. "Where's Michael?" "He's on a business trip. I can't reach him." Her voice was choked with tears. "Don't be scared. I'm on my way." I hung up, grabbed my purse, and ran out the door, hailing a taxi to the hospital. All the way there, I prayed for the baby to be safe. This daughter-in-law, who had once been my adversary, had become an important person in my life, and the child in her womb was the continuation of my bloodline. At the hospital's maternity ward, Claire was lying on an examination bed, her face pale. The doctor said it was a threatened miscarriage, and she needed immediate bed rest. "Helen," she cried when she saw me, "I'm so scared." I took her hand and soothed her. "Don't worry. The doctor said you'll be fine as long as you rest. Have you reached Michael yet?" She shook her head. "He's still on the plane." "Then I'll stay with you," I said firmly. "I won't leave your side." And so, I stayed at the hospital for 3 days, until Michael rushed back. During those 3 days, I took care of Claire's every need, telling her funny stories about Michael's childhood and teaching her quilting stitches to distract her. We were as close as a real mother and daughter. On the day she was discharged, the doctor instructed Claire to have complete bed rest at home for at least 2 weeks. Back home, I made all sorts of nutritious meals for her, made sure she took her medication on time, and even helped her wash her hair and bathe. These acts of intimacy would have been unimaginable before. One night, I got up to check on her and found her in the nursery, stroking the little quilted bib she had made, tears streaming down her face. "Claire?" I called softly. She rushed into my arms. "Helen, thank you. Thank you for not holding a grudge against me, for being so good to me." And I patted her back. "Silly girl, we're family." "Helen," she said, looking up, her eyes blurry with tears. "I want you to promise me something." "What is it?" If one day you," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "if you need to be taken care of, please let me be the one to do it, just like you're taking care of me now." My heart jolted. Had she somehow found out? "Claire." "Michael told me," she said softly. "About your condition, Helen, don't worry. We will be with you. Always." My eyes filled with tears, and I couldn't speak. So Michael had known all along, and Claire, far from being resentful, was making me such a promise. In that moment, all the suffering felt worthwhile. The next day, I brought up the clinical trial myself. Michael signed the consent form with red eyes, then hugged me tightly. "Mom, everything is going to be all right." I nodded, my heart full of hope. Yes, everything was going to be all right. No matter how much my memory faded, love would always remain, like the quilts I sewed one stitch at a time, a thread that would never break. The clinical trial required regular hospital visits for checkups and medication, and either Michael or Claire accompanied me every time, despite my insistence that I could go by myself. "Mom, you can't go out alone anymore," Michael said firmly. "The doctor said you could have a dizzy spell or a memory lapse at any time." I couldn't argue. Just last week, I'd gone to the farmer's market and completely forgotten the way home. I had wandered the streets in a daze for a long time until Maya happened to spot me. After Claire's period of bed rest was over, the doctor allowed her to move around more, but she still rarely went to the studio, choosing to work from home instead. We often sat together on the balcony, she on her laptop, me with my quilting, exchanging a few words now and then in a warm and peaceful atmosphere. "Helen," she asked suddenly one afternoon, "can you teach me how to embroider the baby's name?" "Of course," I said, putting down my work. "Do you know if it's a boy or a girl yet?" She smiled mysteriously. "We do, but I'm not telling Michael yet. I want it to be a surprise." I showed her how to embroider letters on a tiny shirt. She worked clumsily but with intense concentration, constantly asking, "Is this right? Watching her focused profile, I was reminded of myself embroidering Michael's name for the first time when he was just 3 months old. I had stayed up all night preparing his outfit for a family gathering, every stitch filled with a young mother's hopes and dreams. "Helen," Claire interrupted my reverie, "did you and my dad keep in touch after? You know?" I shook my head. "After he went abroad, we lost all contact, until we became family." "I see," she said, then hesitated. "Do you resent him for not fighting for you back then?" The question made me pause my needle and think. "No, I don't. In those days, family pressure was immense. Not everyone had the strength to resist. Besides," I smiled at her, "if he had, there would be no you, and Michael would never have met you." Claire looked thoughtful. "But don't you feel any regret?" "Life is full of regrets, Claire," I said softly. "What's important is to cherish what you have now." She nodded and went back to her embroidery, then suddenly said, "Helen, I think Dad is still in love with you." My needle nearly pricked my finger. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious," she said earnestly. "The way he looks at you is different from how he looked at my mom. It's gentler, more nostalgic." I didn't know how to respond. I had, of course, sensed Eddie's special feelings for me, but we both knew that 35 years and the responsibilities of 2 families lay between us. There was no going back. "Claire," I finally said, "some feelings are best left in our memories." She seemed to understand and didn't press the issue. We continued our needlework in silence, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting dappled shadows on the floor. 2 months into the clinical trial, my memory and mental clarity had noticeably improved. The doctor was pleased, saying I was responding well to the medication and it could potentially delay the progression of the disease by several years. "This means you'll have more time with your grandchild," he said with a smile. The thought filled me with hope. I began creating a whole series of baby items, blankets, bibs, sleep sacks, each one pieced together from Michael's old clothes, passing a father's childhood memories down to the next generation. When Claire saw them, her eyes filled with tears. "Helen, the baby will treasure these forever." "I hope so," I smiled. "When he's older, you can tell him that his grandmother stitched them with love, one stitch at a time." The studio's business was flourishing under Claire and Maya's management. We landed several major contracts, including decorative pieces for a 5-star hotel and a limited edition gift series for a well-known brand. The continuous media coverage also brought in many high-end clients who valued not just the craftsmanship, but the story and emotion behind the work. One day, Eddie came to the studio with surprising news. The city's cultural center wanted to host a solo exhibition of my art. "Really?" I asked, unable to believe it. "It's true," Eddie smiled. "The director saw a report about you on TV and was very impressed with your work. The exhibition is planned for the end of the year and will run for 2 weeks." I was speechless with excitement. For an ordinary retired factory worker, this was an honor I had never dared to dream of. "There's one condition, though," Eddie added. "They hope you can create a new, large-scale piece to be the centerpiece of the exhibition." What kind of piece?" "Something that reflects the changes of our time through the lens of personal memory," he said. "The director believes the greatest value of your work lies in how it intertwines your personal experience with the 40 years of social change in this country." The theme was both thrilling and daunting. My life had indeed been shaped by the nation's dramatic transformations from the countryside to the city, from a planned economy to a market economy, from communal living to individual enterprise. Perhaps the story of a small figure against this grand backdrop was worth recording with a needle and thread. "I'll try," I finally agreed. In the following days, I threw myself into creating the new piece. Tentatively titled Threads of Time, the large-scale quilt would be divided into 4 sections: childhood, youth, middle age, and old age, each using different fabrics and stitching techniques to represent a different stage of life. The childhood section used rough, homespun cloth and simple stitches to convey the simplicity of rural life. The youth section used durable denim and strong backstitching to symbolize my years of hard work in the garment factory. Middle age was a complex collage of various patterned fabrics, reflecting the joys and sorrows of raising Michael alone. And old age used high-end silks and delicate embroidery to depict my current, happy life. Claire and Maya helped me gather materials, Michael documented the creative process on camera, and Eddie provided various rare fabrics and advice. This piece truly became a collaborative effort of the entire family. During the creative process, my mind often drifted between the past and the present. Sometimes, as I was sewing, I would suddenly recall a detail from decades ago with startling clarity: the laughter of my sisters on the production line, the joy of receiving my first paycheck, the sunlight on the day Michael was born. These memory fragments, like scattered pieces of fabric, were being stitched back together, one by one. Strangely, the more I immersed myself in these memories, the clearer my mind became. The doctor had said that Alzheimer's patients often lose recent memories while retaining long-term ones. My creative process seemed to be unlocking those deeply buried treasures. As the piece took shape, more and more old colleagues and neighbors came to visit. Patty brought several old friends from the factory. When they saw the factory scene I had pieced together from denim, their eyes filled with tears. "Helen," Patty said, touching the tiny figures on the fabric, "isn't this our old workshop? That's Foreman Wang, and that's Liu. My God, you even captured Sarah's long braid." The old friends gathered around the quilt, chattering excitedly as they reminisced about the past, those difficult but warm-hearted years, brought back to life by my needle and thread. Some cried, some laughed, some pointed at a detail with a gasp of recognition. The scene was more moving to me than any art critic's review. Claire quietly filmed these moments and posted them on the studio's social media, attracting even more attention and discussion. The city's TV station even sent a reporter to do a special feature, calling my work a living fossil of folk memory. As the exhibition date drew near, however, my health began to fluctuate. One morning, I woke up and suddenly couldn't remember where I was. I didn't even recognize Michael. In a panic, I knocked over a glass of water and a shard cut my finger. A drop of blood fell onto the threads of time quilt. "Mom!" Michael rushed in and saw my bewildered expression. He instantly understood what was happening. He skillfully bandaged my finger, then gave me my medication. As my memory slowly returned, I looked at the blood-stained fabric in shame. "I've ruined it." "It's okay, Mom," he comforted me. "We can clean this small stain. Don't be anxious. Just lie down and rest for a bit." Lying in bed, I heard Michael in the next room, on the phone with my doctor. A wave of fear washed over me. This episode was more severe than the others and had lasted longer. What if this happened during the exhibition? Would I make a fool of myself in public and ruin everyone's hard work? The doctor adjusted my medication dosage and recommended I reduce my workload. But with the exhibition preparations in their final stages, how could I possibly stop? When Eddie heard about the situation, he suggested postponing the exhibition, but I was adamant. "No, everyone has invested so much, we can't cancel because of me." "Helen," he said seriously, "your health is the most important thing." "For me," I said, looking him in the eye, "finishing this exhibition is just as important. This might be the last major work of my life, Eddie. I want to leave something behind for Michael, for Claire, for my future grandchild." He was silent for a long time, then finally relented. "All right, but from now on, you must stick to a strict schedule. No more late nights. We will all share more of the work." And so, with the support of my entire family, Threads of Time was completed on schedule. The final piece was 10 feet long and 7 feet wide, a tapestry of hundreds of fabrics of different materials, colors, and textures, telling the complete life story of an ordinary Chinese woman, from the countryside to the city, from youth to old age. On the day of the opening ceremony, the cultural center was bustling with people media, art critics, craft enthusiasts, and even the deputy mayor came to show their support. I wore a quilted silk dress I had designed and stood before my work, giving interviews and explaining the story behind each section. "What strikes me most about this piece," one critic said after viewing it, "is how it perfectly merges personal memory with collective memory. Every Chinese person can see a reflection of themselves or their family in it." Claire, 7 months pregnant, proudly explained the exhibition's concept to the guests. Michael was busy with the media, while Eddie liaised with the center's staff and VIPs. Our small team worked in perfect harmony, making the exhibition an unprecedented success. At the reception after the opening, the director of the Cultural Center made a surprise announcement. They had decided to permanently acquire Threads of Time as a special exhibit for the 40th anniversary of the country's economic reforms. "This is not just a work of art," the director said emotionally. "It is a testament to an era, a precious sociological document." I stood in the spotlight, looking at the applauding crowd, and in a daze, I saw my life flash before my eyes. The country girl with braids, the diligent factory worker, the strong single mother who raised her son alone. And now I was standing here, receiving praise and applause. Fate is truly a strange and wonderful thing. Halfway through the reception, I felt a familiar wave of dizziness. I knew an episode was coming on. I managed to catch Eddie's eye, and he immediately understood. Making an excuse to show me another exhibit, he guided me to a quiet lounge. "Is it happening again?" he asked, his voice tense. I nodded, a cold sweat already drenching my back. "Don't let anyone know. Get me my medicine." After taking the pill, I leaned back on the sofa, waiting for the storm to pass. Eddie held my hand, softly recounting stories from our youth, helping me stay connected to the present. "Remember that time you pricked your finger with the needle?" he said with a smile. "It wouldn't stop bleeding, and I was running around in a panic, but you just laughed and said, 'What seamstress hasn't been pricked before?'" The memory brought a smile to my face, and my thoughts gradually cleared. Yes, what seamstress hasn't been pricked before? Life is the same. There is laughter, tears, and pain, but in the end, they all become indispensable pieces of the quilt of memory. "Feeling better?" he asked with concern. I nodded. "Much better. Let's go back. We don't want everyone to worry." When we returned to the gallery, Michael and Claire were visibly relieved. Claire quietly took my arm. "Helen, do you want to go home and rest?" "No need." I patted her hand. "On such a wonderful day, I want to enjoy every moment." The exhibition ran for 2 weeks and drew a constant stream of visitors. Many retired factory workers brought their families, pointing at a scene in the quilt and telling their children stories of the past. Young people stood before the work in contemplation, trying to understand the experiences of their parents' generation. Several schools even organized student visits as an extension of their history lessons. The public response far exceeded my expectations. I had thought it would be a simple craft show, but it had struck a deep chord with society. Perhaps, as the critic had said, my personal memory truly did reflect the face of an era. On the closing day of the exhibition, the Cultural Center held a small farewell ceremony for me. The director personally presented me with the acquisition certificate and invited me to hold another exhibition of new works next year. "Mrs. Miller," he said, shaking my hand, "your art demonstrates the profound depth and modern value of folk craftsmanship. I hope you will continue to create and add more brilliance to our city's culture." I was overwhelmed by such praise. To be called a teacher for someone who had been an ordinary worker her whole life, it was a title I had never thought possible. On the way home, the whole family was basking in the success of the exhibition. Claire suddenly said, "Helen, we've picked a name for the baby, and we wanted your opinion." "Oh?" I asked curiously. "What have you chosen?" "If it's a boy, Cole. If it's a girl, Holly," Michael explained. "As a way for our child to always remember their grandmother, Helen." Tears instantly welled up in my eyes. In that small gesture was a world of love and gratitude. No matter how my memory faded in the future, my essence would live on through this child. It was a gift more precious than any artistic achievement. "They're beautiful names," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "So beautiful." And Eddie sat beside us, watching with a gentle smile, his eyes shining with a complex light. In that moment, I suddenly understood that although we had not become husband and wife, our lives were now inextricably linked through our children. This connection was perhaps more enduring and profound than marriage. That night, lying in bed, I reflected on the incredible past few months. From the conflict at the wedding to the founding of the studio and now the success of the exhibition, my life had taken an unexpected turn at the age of 60. Alzheimer's had not defeated me. Instead, it had made me cherish every moment more, to create and love with more urgency. Outside, a bright moon hung in the sky. I gently touched the small, quilted baby outfit beside me, imagining the new life that would soon arrive. No matter how long my memory could hold, the love stitched into these threads would be passed on forever. Claire's due date was in early spring, but one morning in late February, her water broke suddenly, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. "Helen, Helen," she cried, knocking frantically on my door. "I think the baby's coming." I was instantly awake, calming her down while waking Michael. But to make matters worse, the city was buried under the biggest snowstorm of the year. The roads were treacherous, and the ambulance dispatcher said it would be at least 40 minutes before they could reach us. "We can't wait," I said, looking at Claire's increasingly frequent contractions. I made a split-second decision. "Michael, we're driving to the hospital ourselves." Michael's face was pale, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the car keys. I knew he was in no condition to drive safely. "I'll drive," I said decisively. "Mom," Michael stared at me in disbelief. "How long has it been since you've driven?" "Don't worry," I said calmly. "In an emergency like this, my instincts are more reliable than your panic." It was true. I hadn't driven in years and should have been rusty, but in that moment, a strange sense of calm and focus enveloped me. It was as if I had reverted to my younger self, capable of handling any crisis. The Alzheimer's symptoms retreated in the face of the primal instinct to protect my family. The road conditions were horrendous, with near-zero visibility. I gripped the steering wheel, driving as fast as I safely could. In the back seat, Michael held a moaning Claire, constantly encouraging her. "Mom, turn left at the next intersection." "No, right," Michael corrected himself frantically. But at the intersection, I unhesitatingly turned right. "Mom, it's left. The hospital is that way," Michael shouted. "The right is shorter," I said firmly. "They opened a new access road 2 years ago. It leads directly to the emergency entrance." Michael was stunned. "You remember that?" I didn't answer, focusing on navigating the snow-covered, potholed road. Strangely, this new route, which I theoretically shouldn't have remembered, was now mapped out clearly in my mind. Every turn, every landmark was familiar. 15 minutes later, we miraculously arrived at the hospital. The medical staff, alerted by our call, were ready and immediately wheeled Claire into the delivery room. "Family waits outside," a nurse said, stopping Michael from following. "I'm the mother-in-law," I stepped forward. "I've been through childbirth. I can help." The nurse looked at me, then nodded. "All right, you can come in. The rest, please wait here." In the delivery room, Claire was drenched in sweat from the pain. Seeing me was like grabbing a lifeline. "Helen, it hurts so much." "Ah." I took her hand and wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Breathe, Claire. Follow my rhythm. That's it." For the next 2 hours, I stayed by her side, coaching her breathing, encouraging her to push, just as my own mother had done for me. During the lulls between contractions, I even told her the story of Michael's birth. "He made me wait for a whole day and night before he decided to come out," I said. "He was a stubborn baby." Claire managed a weak smile. "He was," I said, gently stroking her hair. "But after he was born, he was so good. He rarely cried. I hope this little one is just the same." As the first rays of morning sun streamed through the window, a loud, healthy cry announced the arrival of a new life. "It's a boy," the doctor declared happily. 6 pounds, 3 ounces. A bit early, but perfectly healthy. Claire was exhausted but smiled through her tears of joy. "Cole, welcome to the world, Cole." End of. After the nurses cleaned and swaddled the baby, they handed him to Claire for a moment before placing him in my arms. Looking at this tiny, wrinkled creature, tears streamed down my face. This was my grandson, the continuation of my bloodline, a new hope for the future. "Helen," Claire said weakly, "thank you. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You did wonderfully, Claire. Now rest. Michael and I will take care of the little one." And, carrying my grandson out of the delivery room, I was met by a frantic Michael. He looked at the baby and started to laugh and cry at the same time. "Mom, that's my son. I'm a father." "Yes," I said, carefully placing the baby in his arms. "You're a father. This is Cole, your son, and my grandson." Michael held the baby, his movements clumsy but gentle. Then he remembered something. "Mom, how did you know about that new road? Even I forgot about it. I paused, puzzled myself. I don't know. It just came to me. A doctor who was passing by happened to overhear us. He said thoughtfully, "It's been observed that Alzheimer's patients can sometimes exhibit surprising memory recall in emergency situations, especially memories tied to strong emotions or instincts. A mother's love is one of the most powerful forces in the world." His explanation brought tears to both my and Michael's eyes. Yes, no matter how the disease eroded my mind, the instinct to love and protect my family was etched so deeply into my soul that it would never fade. Claire had to stay in the hospital for a few days to recover. Michael and I took turns staying with her, while the other went home to care for the baby. Even though we had hired a professional nurse, I insisted on being part of every detail of my grandson's care, feeding, changing, bathing. The familiar actions awakened memories of caring for Michael 30 years ago, as if time had folded back on itself. "Mom, don't overdo it," Michael said with concern. "You need to rest too. How could taking care of my grandson be tiring?" I smiled. "This is a joy." Little Cole was indeed as well behaved as his father had been. He ate, he slept, and he rarely fussed. When he opened his clear eyes and looked at me, I saw Michael as a newborn, and the pure miracle of life struck my heart all over again. After Claire came home, our life as a 3-generation household officially began. It was chaotic, but filled with laughter. After my quilt, Threads of Time, was acquired by the Cultural Center, the studio received even more high-end orders. Claire managed the business remotely from home, planning to return full-time when the baby was a little older. One warm spring afternoon, the whole family was on the balcony. Enjoying the Sunday, Claire held a sleeping Cole. Michael was tending to his potted plants, and I was sewing a new quilt, a commemorative wall hanging made from the blanket and clothes my grandson wore at the hospital. "Helen," Claire said suddenly, "for Cole's 1-month celebration, I'd like to invite my dad over for dinner, if you don't mind." My needle paused. "Of course I don't mind. He's the baby's grandfather. And, she hesitated. "If you're willing, I'd like you and him to have some time to talk alone. He has some things he wants to say to you." I looked up at her and saw understanding and encouragement in her eyes. Had Eddie told her something? "Claire." "Helen," she interrupted softly, "life is short. You and Dad are at an age where some things, if left unsaid, might become permanent regrets." I was silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right." End 1. On the day of the celebration, the house was full of life. Not only Eddie, but also Maya and a few close friends were there. Little Cole was the center of attention, dressed in a quilted outfit I had made, looking like a proud little prince. After the guests left, Claire and Michael made an excuse to take the baby for a walk in the park, leaving Eddie and me alone on the balcony. The spring sunset painted everything in gold, and the breeze carried the scent of flowers. "Helen," Eddie broke the silence, "I've wanted to say something to you for a long time." I nervously clutched my teacup. "Yes?" 35 years ago. He looked directly into my eyes. "I didn't have the courage to stand up to my family, and I gave you up. It has been the biggest regret of my life. Eddie, let's not talk about the past." "No, let me finish," he insisted. "Over the years, I built a successful career and had a good family, but in the quiet of the night, I would always wonder, what if I had been braver? What would our lives be like now?" I looked at the silver in his hair and remembered the young manager who had bribed a security guard to let me listen to the radio while I worked the late shift. Time had passed. We were no longer young. "Meeting you again," he continued. "Seeing you still so strong, so kind, so talented. Eddie," I said softly, "we're old now. You have your life, I have mine. The way things are is good." "No, it's not good enough," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Helen, I want to take care of you, openly and honestly. I want to face this Alzheimer's with you, as your husband." I stared at him in shock. "What are you saying?" "I am asking you to marry me, Helen Miller." He knelt on one knee and took a small velvet box from his pocket. "Not out of pity or a sense of duty, but because I love you. I have loved you since we were young, and I have never stopped." The diamond ring in the box sparkled in the sunset, like a single, solidified tear. My vision blurred, and my heart was a whirlwind of emotions. "Eddie, this is too sudden." The children. The children are supportive, he said quickly. Claire figured it out a long time ago. And Michael said, all that matters is your happiness. Helen, we're not young anymore. We don't have much time left. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. What about the studio? And Claire? And the baby? Everything will stay the same. We can live across the hall, or buy a bigger house together. You can work when you want to, rest when you need to. I want the right to be by your side, to face every day that's to come. End of 4. Looking into his earnest eyes, I suddenly understood that this might be our last chance. Alzheimer's would gradually steal my memories and my abilities. He didn't want to be a bystander in that process. He wanted to be my legal partner, with the right to stand by my side in every difficult moment. Eddie, I said, my voice choked, what if one day I don't even recognize you anymore? He took my hand. Then I will reintroduce myself to you every single day until you remember. Helen, memories may fade, but love does not. It's like your quilts. Even if one patch of fabric fades, the whole piece is still beautiful. His metaphor touched me deeply. Yes, life is like a quilt, pieced together from countless fragments of memory. Even if some pieces fade or are lost, the overall pattern is still whole, still worthy of being cherished. Okay, I whispered, holding out my left hand. Yes. He took my hand, his own trembling, and slid the ring onto my finger. Then we held each other, like two travelers who had finally found their way home. When Michael and Claire returned with the baby, they saw the rings on our hands and broke into knowing smiles. Little Cole seemed to sense the joyful atmosphere and giggled in his mother's arms. Grandma's little darling, I said, taking my grandson and kissing his soft cheek. Grandma has some good news for you. And so, in my 61st year, after all the ups and downs of my life, I was engaged again. This time, our marriage would be about more than just love. It would be about companionship, understanding, and the courage to face the future together. The wedding was planned for the fall, a simple and warm affair. I made my own wedding dress, a quilted one, of course, incorporating fabric from all the important moments of my life. Eddie arranged for the ceremony to be held by a lake, at the same spot where we had said our first goodbyes 35 years earlier. The Alzheimer's is still there. The medication only slows its progress, but I am no longer afraid. I know that no matter how my memories fade, the things I have created, the love I have given, and the lives I have touched will endure. It is like the quilting skills I passed on to Claire, which she is now passing on to Maya, and which will one day be passed on to little Cole. One stitch at a time, from one generation to the next. Life is the fabric, and time is the needle. There is the pain of tearing, the strength of mending, and the creativity of piecing it all together to finally create a unique and beautiful tapestry. And that is more than enough.